exaggeration, thousands. Thanks, Mark. And thank you for supporting IC Stars, everyone. You all have an amazing panel that's going to talk in a few minutes. But I did want to just tell one quick story before I turn the mic over to your awesome panelists. And it is the founding story of IC Stars. So I was a school teacher, and I taught math and science. And I got to work all over the Midwest with kids who had lots of resources and kids who had very little. And the one thing that I saw was that the kids who had faced the most adversity had the most resiliency. And in fact, that resiliency was like a toolkit. And inside of it was critical thinking skills, creativity, reciprocity, chutzpah, you name it. And yet the narrative about these kids was that they weren't ready for school, they couldn't do higher math, yada, yada. We've all heard that. So if I could just take you for a moment to my chemistry class. So it's the first day of chemistry, and I would pull down the periodic table and have everybody pick their element. And that's who they'd be for the whole semester. So if you were iron, I would call you Effie. and if you were gold, I'd say, hey, you! Thank you so much for laughing. Thank you. And so after they were all assigned their elements, then I would ask them whether they wanted to be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. You know, so all the cool guys were like, solid, you know. Like some of the girls were like, liquid. But the geeks, who were thinking, where's she going with this? Because that's what geeks do, try to figure out 2 steps ahead, would say gas. Now imagine you're 17, and you've just declared to everybody that you want to be a gas, right? You're going to hear some sounds, you know what I mean? And so immediately I'd separate the class. The solids would sit in the front row, and I'd say your molecules are packed tightly together and you cannot move. Sometimes I'd talk to them as if they weren't as smart as everyone else, because they were solids. And then the liquids, I'd rope off a section of the class and say you have a little more mobility because your molecules are more spread out, but you will always take the shape of your container. And the gases, of course, because their molecules were spread out, had all the freedom in the world. So if I left the door open, they could leave. Now, I don't care where you grow up, where you come from, what every 17-year-old wants more than anything is freedom. And so right then and there, the games were on, right? The solids would be like, well, that is not fair. And I'd say, well, then you've got to change your state of matter. Or like class mobility, we have to begin to change our state of mind. And our class together is going to be figuring out how to do that. But we're going to use the language of science. And so we always had a good old time, right? Like nuclear physics was like a big mosh pit. We figured out who of our friends and family were unstable and radioactive and breaking down. And my students would always come back and visit me. And the question was always, what are you doing with your science? What's your truth? And so probably one of the brightest kids that I'd ever taught came to see me one day. And I mean, bright, like could figure out cold fusion smart. And I said, what are you doing with your science? What's your truth? And he said, well, I'm working in cleaning services, and you'd be surprised at what people don't know about the basic properties of ammonia. And we both kind of giggled and snorted a little bit. And then I realized what an incredible waste this was. This kid was brilliant. And he's basically telling me that he's cleaning toilets. And he's cheerful about it. And just as I'm like freaking out, he looks me in the eye and he says, Sandee, I don't think you're listening to me. You have always told us that leadership is making opportunities for others. And so it doesn't matter if I'm in a lab coat or a lecture hall or I'm cleaning toilets, I'm teaching people like you taught us. And that was it. My life changed. Thank you. And you know, every entrepreneur has that story when you know you were so great at something and then all of a sudden you realize you can't do that anymore. You have to do something that you might really suck at because you know it's the right path. And so this was the late 90s. Technology was hot. There were startups everywhere. And I kept thinking about Javier, who was undocumented and wasn't even making minimum wage because of his documentation status, and that he fundamentally understood the core principles of leadership. And my big question was, what if we married leadership and technology? That what technology does is presents a framework for solving problems and building solutions. If we taught people how to code, they got great jobs in IT, and this framework for solving problems and building solutions, what if we then use that as a blueprint for solving problems and building solutions in the communities that we come from? So we launched our first training cycle in 2000. We've been going strong ever since. We have a 90% placement rate for our graduates. The average earning increase is over 400% from before the program to after the program. We have over 50 homeowners at IC Stars, so people who were receiving public assistance have now purchased homes. And what's really cool about that metric is that they're buying homes in the communities that they came from. So we asked the question of, what if we determine success not by getting out of the hood, but by investing back in? How would that change our communities? And today we are in 3 cities, Columbus, Chicago, and Milwaukee. And the last metric that I'll tell you is that every single day I am inspired by an alum or an intern, was what we call our students, when they light up and how excited they are about what they're learning, what they're doing, and what they're making. So thank you all so much for supporting IC Stars and what we do.
Thank you, Kate.